In a world where overpopulation is dominating global concerns, leading to resource depletion, urban crowding, and environmental strain, South Korea is on the downside and facing population decline instead. Fewer people mean less strain on housing, public transport, and natural resources, right? While that may sound appealing in theory, the reality of a collapsing population is a nightmare scenario, especially for South Korea. Instead of relief, this demographic shift is paving the way for national crisis, with serious economic, social, and geopolitical consequences. South Korea's population is aging and shrinking at an alarming rate. The fertility rate hit a world record low of 0.72 in 2023. A smaller population means fewer workers to drive the economy, innovate, and fund public programs through taxes. At the same time, the aging population will demand greater resources for healthcare, pensions, and social welfare, putting immense pressure on an already strained system. This crisis is an existential threat to more than just society and the economy. South Korea's strategic position on the global stage adds another layer of complexity. In a region marked by tensions with North Korea and an increasingly aggressive China, a declining population threatens the country's ability to maintain a strong military and secure its borders. While some nations are grappling with overpopulation, South Korea's battle with population collapse is a story of its own and highlights the challenges of the extreme opposite, which are bound to create a perfect storm of challenges for the nation's future, as we will see later in the video. If you enjoyed this type of content, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support helps keep the channel going and brings more valuable insights your way. Stay tuned for more, and thank you for being part of the community. The fertility rate is the average number of children born to a woman in her lifetime. And for South Korea, it has had a dramatic decline over the past several decades. South Korea had a population boom in the 1960s. Back then, women had an average of 6 children. During this era, South Korea was a relatively poor country, just emerging from the Korean War. The government started focusing on economic development, but there were also significant shifts in healthcare, education, and family dynamics that helped boost the population. South Korea saw major advancements in healthcare, which reduced infant mortality rates. At the same time, the government was encouraging larger families and launching campaigns to promote high birth rates. The economic changes also played a role in this. As the economy began to industrialize, more people were moving from rural areas to cities for jobs, and life expectancy increased. With better living conditions and a growing economy, families felt more secure in raising children. All these factors combined to create a population boom during this time. Flash forward to 2 decades later, the situation began to change in the 1980s, and the fertility rate dropped sharply due to a mix of rising costs and changing social attitudes, marking the start of the population decline we see today. Fertility rates dropped to 2.1 children per woman and sat exactly on the replacement level. This is the average number of children a woman needs to have to ensure a population remains stable over time, without immigration accounting for child mortality and other factors. If the fertility rate falls below this level, the population begins to shrink, and this is the position that South Korea now finds itself in. According to Statistics Korea, the nation's current fertility rate is 0.72. And this dropped by a staggering 8% from 0.78 recorded in 2022. This rate means that for every 100 women, only 72 babies are born. And these numbers paint a bleak future for the nation. With South Korea's fertility rates continuing to plummet, with fewer babies born each year, the country is also experiencing an increase in life expectancy. In 2023, the average life expectancy in South Korea reached 83.5 years, one of the highest globally. And an increase in life expectancy in South Korea is a positive development. It means that people are living healthier and longer lives, thanks to advances in healthcare, better living standards, and improved public health. While this increase in life expectancy is a success, it also brings a new set of challenges, particularly the aging population. The aging population is becoming a significant issue for South Korea. As life expectancy rises, fewer young people are being born, leading to a demographic shift that is creating what's known as an inverted population pyramid. Traditionally, population pyramids look like triangles, with a broad base of younger people and a narrow top representing the elderly. In South Korea's case, the shape is flipping over its head. There's now a larger proportion of elderly people and fewer young people. This shift creates an imbalance that affects several aspects of society. One major concern is the pressure on the healthcare system. As South Korea's population ages, the healthcare system is also under strain. One major concern is the pressure on the healthcare system. As South Korea's population ages, the healthcare system is also under strain. Elderly individuals require more healthcare attention, including long-term care, which places a heavy burden on hospitals, clinics, and medical professionals. South Korea's healthcare system has long been praised for its efficiency and access to care, but with a rapidly aging population, it is facing a crisis. One of the most immediate problems is the shortage of healthcare professionals. The problem is compounded by the increasing demand for long-term care facilities and services for the elderly. As the number of elderly individuals increases, so does the need for specialized care, such as nursing homes, hospice services, and home-based care. The government has made efforts to expand the availability of these services, but the sheer scale of the challenges make it difficult to provide sufficient care for all the elderly citizens. This is evidenced by the deployment of army doctors to the emergency rooms to help with the workload, as the healthcare system is in crisis mode. Additionally, the cost of healthcare for the elderly is rising rapidly. As people live longer, they require more medical attention, including treatment for chronic conditions and age-related diseases. This puts pressure on the public health system and increases the financial burden on the government. If South Korea's healthcare system cannot adapt to the needs of an aging population, it may struggle to maintain the level of care that has been a hallmark of the country's success. The impact of South Korea's declining fertility rate and aging population is already evident in the country's population statistics. In 2022, South Korea experienced a sobering milestone: more deaths than births, with 307,764 deaths compared to 275,815 births, reflecting a 3.1 increase in fatalities from 2019. This was most likely impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, with increased mortality rates due to the virus. But even without the pandemic, the country's birth rate has been on a steady decline for years, signaling a long-term demographic shift. The population decline is not only a statistical concern, but also a socioeconomic one. As the population shrinks, so too does the domestic consumer base, which could lead to economic stagnation. The labor force will also shrink, making it harder for businesses to find workers and for the economy to grow. The demographic trends in South Korea are leading to alarming projections for the country's future. According to expert estimates, the South Korean population could decline by as much as 40% over the next 50 years. The population, which currently stands at around 52 million, could drop to 36 million by 2070 and continue to fall to just 27 million by 2100. This decline will have profound effects on South Korea's economy, society, and culture. A shrinking population means a smaller workforce, which will have a significant impact on economic productivity. As older individuals retire, they leave behind a gap that needs to be filled by younger workers. But with South Korea's low fertility rate and fewer young people being born, there aren't enough people entering the labor market to replace those who are retiring. This creates a potential labor shortage. A shrinking workforce results in fewer people paying into the Social Security and pension systems, which are essential to support the growing elderly population. With fewer people working and contributing, the government may struggle to fund healthcare and pensions for retirees, leading to financial instability in the long term. As you have noticed, the low fertility rate in South Korea has created a whole chain reaction. First up, its population decline, which in turn has led to an aging population. And that has led to a shrinking labor force, which now creates the age dependency disaster. An age dependency ratio measures the number of people who are considered dependent on the working population, specifically those under 15 and over 65, compared to the working age group, typically 15 to 64. In the case of South Korea, the age dependency ratio is a disaster, as this has been rising for years. Projections indicate that by 2070, the country will have more retirees than working age people. This shift presents a major challenge for South Korea's economic stability, as fewer workers will be available to support an increasingly large elderly population. Historically speaking, the age dependency ratio was much more favorable. In the past, South Korea boasted a workforce where there were approximately 20 working individuals for every retiree. This balance allowed the government and businesses to fund social services, including pensions and healthcare, with a relatively small tax burden on each worker. Then came the rapid decline in birth rates, combined with increased life expectancy, which then turned this model upside down. As of 2023, South Korea faces a situation where the number of retirees is quickly approaching the number of people still contributing to the workforce. By 2070, it is projected that the number of retirees will exceed the number of workers, placing an immense strain on the economy, the pension system, and public services. South Korea's pension system is largely based on the pay-as-you-go model. Under this system, current workers pay taxes that are used to fund pensions of retirees. This basically means that you are taking care of the previous generation, banking on the idea that the next generation will take care of you when you reach retirement age. This model relies on having a large, active workforce to support a smaller retired population. In the past, the ratio of working people to retirees was favorable, but as the number of retirees increases and the working population shrinks, the sustainability of this system is now questionable. When South Korea's pension system was first established, it worked effectively because the number of workers was much higher than the number of retirees. At its peak, there were approximately 20 workers for every retiree, which meant that pension payments could be covered relatively easily. But now that there is an aging population, this ratio has shifted significantly. The number of working people is now approaching the number of retirees, and shortly there will be more retirees than workers. This situation is a problem for South Korea's economy and its pension system. With fewer workers contributing to the system, there will be less money available to support retirees. As a result, pension payments will need to be increased to cover the rising number of retirees, which could lead to a higher tax burden on the working population. Alternatively, the government could cut pension benefits, which would leave retirees without sufficient income to support themselves. Either scenario presents a major challenge for South Korea's economic stability. With few people contributing to the pension system, younger generations will likely face a heavier tax burden to support the elderly. With fewer people contributing to the pension system, younger people will likely face a heavier tax burden to support the elderly. This could lead to social tensions, as younger people may feel that they are being unfairly burdened by policies that favor the older, wealthier generation. The elderly population, being the majority, will hold significant political power, potentially leading to policies that favor their needs at the expense of younger people. This imbalance could create a generational divide, undermining social harmony and causing unrest, and the government has to come up with a plan to counter this. In response to the age dependency disaster, the South Korean president Yoon Suk-yeol set up the National Pension Fund, the NPF, which aims to provide a more sustainable solution to the growing pension problem. As of 2023, the NPF has accumulated over $860 billion in assets, making it the third largest pension fund in the world, after those of Japan and the United States. The NPF is designed to provide long-term financial support for South Korea's retirees, and its massive investment portfolio has the potential to generate significant returns to help cover future pension obligations. The fund is a brilliant idea, but the long-term outlook for the NPF is less promising. By 2041, it is projected that the fund's payments will start to outpace the contributions made by the working individuals. In other words, the money being paid out to the retirees will exceed the amount being contributed by the workforce. By 2025, it is expected that the fund will be depleted entirely, which raises serious concerns about how South Korea will provide for its elderly population in the coming decades. The depletion of the NPF is a direct consequence of the country's demographic trends, with fewer workers contributing to the system and a growing number of retirees. The pension system faces an unsustainable future. The government will either need to find new sources of funding for the NPF, increase taxes on workers, or cut pension benefits, all of which present significant problems. Despite its demographic challenges, South Korea has defied expectations with strong economic growth over the last 2 decades. South Korea's GDP growth rate has been consistently impressive, reaching double digits on several occasions. For example, in 2004, the country experienced a growth rate of 4.7%, while in 2021, it reported a GDP growth of 4.0%. Between 2000 and 2020, South Korea's GDP grew by an average of 3.5% annually, a rate higher than many developed nations. This robust performance is especially striking when viewed in the context of a declining birth rate and an aging population. Several factors explain South Korea's impressive GDP growth despite its demographic challenges. The first is the country's successful transition to an advanced industrial economy. After the Korean War, South Korea was one of the poorest countries in the world. However, the country implemented rapid industrialization and economic reforms, particularly in the 1970s and 1980s, which allowed it to catch up with many of its wealthier neighbors. Today, South Korea is home to multinational corporations like Samsung, Hyundai, and LG, which have driven the economy's technological advancements and exports. South Korea is a global leader in electronics and telecommunications. It also has a focus on high-tech industries and innovation, which has allowed the country to stay competitive in the global marketplace, even as its population declines. The country's export-led growth model has also played a key role in boosting its GDP. South Korea is one of the world's largest exporters, with industries ranging from automobiles and ships to semiconductors. This reliance on global markets has enabled the country to thrive despite a shrinking domestic population. As a result, South Korea's economic growth has remained relatively strong compared to other countries with similarly low birth rates such as Japan. South Korea's remarkable GDP growth, despite its declining birth rate, came by way of several factors. First, the country's industrial base is highly diversified, with strong sectors in electronics, automotives, and shipbuilding. These industries have seen global success, particularly in the export market. For instance, South Korea's electronics industry is a global leader, with companies like Samsung and LG at the forefront of innovations in consumer electronics, smartphones, and semiconductors. South Korea has invested heavily in research and development. The government and private sector have worked together to establish cutting-edge technologies that have propelled South Korea's economy forward. South Korean companies are not only manufacturing products, but are also engaged in the development of new technology, including artificial intelligence, robotics, and renewable energy. This focus on innovation has allowed the country to remain competitive, even with a smaller and older workforce. The country's high level of education has also played a significant role in its economic growth. South Korea boasts one of the highest literacy rates in the world, and its education system is renowned for producing skilled workers in fields like engineering, technology, and science. This has allowed South Korea to cultivate a highly skilled labor force capable of competing on the global stage, even as the population ages. The country has a highly efficient transport system, advanced communication networks, and world-class facilities that make it an attractive destination for foreign investment. These factors have contributed to the country's ability to maintain strong economic growth despite demographic trends that might otherwise hinder progress. One of the most striking developments in recent years is South Korea's rise in GDP per capita, surpassing Japan in 2023 and slated to do so again with a year of growth from 1.6% from last year. This marks a significant shift, as Japan traditionally has been one of the largest and most powerful economies in Asia. However, South Korea's success is not simply due to a temporary boost in its economic performance. It represents a long-term trend driven by strategic investments in technology, education, and infrastructure. There are several reasons for South Korea's success in overtaking Japan. First, South Korea's industries have become more specialized, particularly in high-tech fields like semiconductors, biotechnology, and information technology. In contrast, Japan's economy has struggled to modernize some of its traditional industries, such as automobiles and electronics, in the face of increasing competition from emerging markets. As a result, South Korea has been able to position itself at the forefront of the global technology race, while Japan has faced challenges in maintaining its competitive edge. Despite its impressive economic growth, South Korea's current trajectory is not sustainable in the long term. The country's working age population is shrinking rapidly, and this will impact its productivity and economic performance in the long run. The South Korean workforce is expected to shrink by half, from 36 million to just 16 million by 2050, This demographic shift poses a major challenge to the country's ability to sustain its high levels of output and remain competitive on the international stage. A smaller workforce means fewer people to contribute to the economy, leading to slower growth and a potential decline in living standards. As businesses face labor shortages, they may be forced to raise wages, which could make South Korean products more expensive and less attractive to global consumers. This could undermine the country's export-driven economy, which relies on competitiveness in the international market. The aging population will place an increasing burden on South Korea's social welfare systems, and this will require more government spending on healthcare, pensions, and social services, leading to potential financial instability. The shrinking workforce will also result in a reduced talent pool for industries that are essential to South Korea's economy, such as technology, manufacturing, and healthcare. One of the most significant and potentially dire consequences of South Korea's population decline is its effect on national security, particularly in the military. Currently, South Korea maintains a standing army of around 400,000 active duty personnel, supported by a large reserve force. This is in contrast to its adversary, North Korea, which has a standing army of over 1 million soldiers. CNN recently published a report citing that South Korea now has a new enemy, and its population dynamics that stand to upset its military structure. The military balance on the Korean peninsula has historically relied on the manpower and technological advancement of the South Korean armed forces, along with its technological advantages. South Korea's population continues to decline. This manpower foothold is at risk. The country's aging population, coupled with a shrinking workforce, means fewer young people are available to serve in the military. This will likely force South Korea to reduce the size of its military or rely increasingly on technology and automation, a strategy that could lead to vulnerabilities if not carefully managed. South Korea's military budget is facing increasing pressure. As the government's fiscal space shrinks, a smaller share of the GDP is allocated to the military, which could undermine the country's defense capabilities in the long run. This is increasingly concerning given the growing threat from North Korea, which has continued to develop nuclear weapons and maintain a large, well-funded military. The combination of declining population and a shrinking military budget could force South Korea to reconsider its defensive strategy. While technological advancements may offset some of the manpower losses, the country could find itself in a dangerous situation if the security environment on the peninsula worsens. The population decline in South Korea is not just an urban issue. It is also having a severe impact on the country's rural areas. Another consequence of South Korea's declining population is the rapid urbanization that took place in the 20th century. Since the 1960s, South Korea has experienced massive migration from rural areas to urban centers. With 81% of the population now living in cities, this trend has led to the rise of large metropolitan areas like Seoul, Incheon, and Busan, with rural areas having experienced population declines and the development of ghost towns. More than 1,000 towns and villages in South Korea are facing extinction, as young people flock to cities for better job opportunities and a higher standard of living. Rural communities are left with an aging population and no one to replace the retiring workforce. This has led to a situation where entire villages are slowly disappearing as their populations dwindle and the younger generations move away. A closer look at the population density map reveals that much of South Korea is basically empty, with people concentrated in cities. This rural depopulation is a serious concern for the country's agriculture and food production. As fewer people are available to work the land, the agricultural sector will struggle to remain viable. Additionally, the loss of rural communities could lead to a broader cultural erosion as traditional ways of life and local customs fade away as the nation continues to urbanize. While it may contribute immensely to South Korea's economic development, urbanization has also hurt the country's fertility rates. Living costs in urban areas are high, particularly for housing, which has led many young couples to delay or forego having children. For many, having children is seen as financially unfeasible, especially given the rising costs of education, healthcare, and housing. The average price of a home in Seoul is astronomical, making it difficult for young couples to afford a place to live. In addition, child-rearing costs are substantial, particularly when it comes to education. Education in South Korea is highly competitive, and many parents feel immense pressure to ensure their children succeed academically. This pressure is not only social, but also economic. Parents believe that for their children to have a successful future, they must attend prestigious universities and secure well-paying jobs. However, the cost of preparing children for this academic success is a significant financial burden. Private tutoring, private schools, and extracurricular activities add up to tens of thousands of dollars each year, making it difficult for many families to afford to have multiple children. One of the major factors contributing to the difficulty of raising children in South Korea is the intense focus on academic achievement. South Korean society places a great deal of importance on educational success, and the competition to get into top schools and universities is fierce. This phenomenon is known as the golden ticket syndrome, where securing a place at a prestigious school is seen as the key to success in life. Children in South Korea spend an extraordinary amount of time studying. On average, students attend regular school for about 8 hours a day, but many also participate in after-school programs, private tutoring, and additional classes. It is not uncommon for children to study for 12 to 15 hours a day, including weekends. This pressure to perform academically is overwhelming, with students pushed to achieve the highest grades possible to secure a place at one of the country's top schools and universities. This hyper-competitive environment takes a toll on children's mental and physical health. The intense study schedules leave little time for recreation, socializing, or developing other skills outside of academics. In many cases, children are exhausted and stressed, often experiencing anxiety, depression, and even suicidal thoughts. South Korea has one of the highest suicide rates among OECD countries, and many suicides among young people are attributed to academic pressures and harsh educational systems. The overwhelming pressure to succeed academically, combined with the financial burden of raising children, is having a direct impact on marriage and family life in South Korea. Many young people are postponing or foregoing marriage altogether. Fewer couples are having children. A survey conducted in 2023 revealed that 2/3 of young adults in South Korea don't feel comfortable with the idea of marriage. In 2023, the number of marriages in South Korea fell to a historic low for the first time since 1981. There was a 40% decrease from 2013, and the number of births has continued to decline as a result of that. The demanding work culture, long hours, and pressure to excel professionally leave little time for personal relationships. As a result, many young South Koreans opt for singlehood or delay marriage for many years, leading to fewer births and a shrinking population. South Korea is known for its long working hours, which often leave workers with little time for family life, marriage, or childcare. In 2022, South Koreans worked an average of 1,901 hours annually, one of the highest averages among developed nations. With a typical workday running from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., many employees are putting in significantly more time than the standard 40-hour work week. Many South Koreans report working up to 69 hours a week, a grueling schedule that severely limits the time to start a family. Additionally, wage stagnation in South Korea is a compounding problem. Over the last 2 decades, wages have barely kept up with inflation, with only a 27% increase over the past 20 years. Stagnant pay, an overwork culture, and a high cost of living have contributed to a serious mental health crisis, with the country experiencing one of the highest suicide rates in the world. In 2023, South Korea ranked 4th globally in terms of suicide rates, with over 13,000 people taking their own lives each year. Among these, a significant proportion are linked to work-related stress and mental health issues. High levels of workplace pressure, coupled with the societal expectation of working long hours, leave many individuals struggling with stress, depression, and burnout. This mental health crisis also impacts family life, as individuals who are overworked or struggling with depression may find it difficult to maintain relationships or raise children. The overwhelming focus on work and achievement leaves little space for personal well-being, further discouraging people from starting or expanding their families. Another critical factor influencing South Korea's declining birth rate is the significant gender pay gap. According to the OECD, South Korea has the highest gender pay gap among its member nations. Women in South Korea earn, on average, only 63% of what men make for doing the same work, a disparity that has deep roots in the country's traditional gender roles and expectations. This wage inequality creates a barrier to having children, especially for women. Many women in South Korea feel compelled to choose between having a family and pursuing a career. as the high cost of child rearing, combined with the financial inequality in the workplace, makes it difficult for women to balance both. In a society that still heavily emphasizes traditional gender roles, women are often expected to take on the majority of childcare and household responsibilities, even if they are working a full-time job. To combat the declining birth rates, the South Korean government has spent over $250 billion on various incentives for families to have children. These incentives have included monthly subsidies for parents, housing allowances, and extended parental leave. For example, parents can receive as much as $750 per month in child subsidies, and parental leave has been extended from 1 year to a year and a half. There has been talk of a new policy proposal that would provide a cash payment of 100 million won, or about 72,500 USD, to families with newborns in an effort to tackle the country's decreasing birth rates. Despite these efforts, South Korea's birth rate continues to decline, and the country's demographic future remains bleak. The failure of these policies can be attributed to several factors. First, the financial pressures of living in urban areas, coupled with the stagnating wages, make it difficult for young people to afford the costs of raising children. Second, there is a societal expectation for both parents to maintain full-time careers, which creates a work-life imbalance that discourages childbearing. Finally, cultural factors such as changing attitudes towards marriage and family have contributed to a decline in birth rates. While the government has implemented some measures to attract foreign workers, these have been relatively limited in scope. Foreign workers in South Korea are often employed in low-wage, temporary jobs, and they do not have the same access to social benefits or long-term residency opportunities as native-born citizens. This limits the positive impact that immigration could have on South Korea's declining population, as the country remains heavily reliant on its shrinking native workforce. To counter the demographic crisis, some experts argue that South Korea needs to adopt more open and inclusive migration policies. By allowing more immigrants to settle in South Korea, the country could boost its population and workforce, easing some of the economic pressures that come with a declining birth rate. However, such a shift would require significant changes in societal attitudes towards immigration and the integration of foreign workers into South Korean society. Global Recaps is our gift to you, a free newsletter that delivers the most important geopolitical news straight to your inbox. No filters, no barriers. Sign up today to get straight to the point updates with zero restrictions. Global Recaps brings you essential news directly for free. Click below to sign up now. To effectively combat South Korea's population crisis, a comprehensive, multi-phase strategy is required, targeting both economic and cultural factors that contribute to the nation's declining birth rate. One of the key solutions is improving the work-life balance, as many South Koreans face demanding work hours that leave little time for family life. By encouraging more flexible work arrangements, offering paid parental leave, and fostering a culture that values family time, the government could support citizens in balancing their careers and raising children. Additionally, addressing housing affordability is crucial, as the high cost of living, particularly in urban areas, has deterred many young couples from starting families. By implementing policies to lower housing prices or provide affordable housing options for young families, the government could ease the financial burden on potential parents. Reforming immigration policies is another potential solution, with Seoul Mayor Oh Se-hoon calling for a shift from Korea's selective immigration system to a more inclusive approach. Encouraging the immigration of skilled workers could help offset the shrinking workforce while also fostering a more diverse society. Finally, promoting gender equality is vital, as traditional roles often place the majority of caregiving responsibilities on women, discouraging them from having more children. By implementing policies that promote equal opportunities for both men and women in the workplace and at home, South Korea can create an environment more conducive to family life and population growth. The population decline presents both opportunities and significant challenges. While a smaller population may offer more resources and space for those who remain, the long-term effects of an aging population and shrinking workforce could seriously impact the country's economic and national security. Despite impressive GDP growth and rising GDP per capita, these successes are unsustainable without addressing demographic issues. The aging population is putting pressure on healthcare, pensions, and the labor market, with the number of retirees soon surpassing the number of workers. While the National Pension Fund aims to address these issues, it is not a long-term solution, as contributions will soon fall short. This demographic crisis is not just an economic issue, but also a national security concern, affecting South Korea's competitiveness and stability. If current trends continue without major reforms, South Korea could face economic stagnation, social unrest, and a weakened global position.